Hello, my name is Marfesmin Shukti, and today I am going to reflect on what I have learned about project management during weeks 1 to 4. Before studying these topics, I had a fairly basic understanding of project management. I thought it was mainly about creating a plan, assigning tasks, and making sure everything was completed before the deadline. However, after learning about project management frameworks, the IT context, agile and traditional methodologies, time management, and the project management profession, I realized the project management is much broader. In this presentation, I'll discuss three key concept that I found particularly important, how my thinking has changed, how I would apply this concept to an IT project, and on challenging concept, and how I can use this knowledge in my future studies and career. So now I will talk about what I learned from weeks to 4. One important concept I learned is the project life cycle. In my understanding, a project does not simply start with development and finish when the product is delivered. It normally moves through different stages such as initiation, planning, execution, monitoring, and control and closure. The important thing I learned is that each stage has a different purpose. For example, during initiation, we understand the project purpose and objective. During planning, we decide what needs to be done, who will do it, and how much time may be required. So the concept number 2 is agile versus traditional. The second concept is the difference between agile and traditional approaches such as waterfall. Waterfall is more sequential. Generally, one stage is completed before moving to the next stage. Agile is more uh, iterative. Work is divided into similar cycle, and feedback can be incorporated throughout the project. The concept number 3 is work breakdown structure, or WBS, together with project time and management. WBS helps break a large project into similar and more manageable tasks. On Once the project is divided into smaller tasks, it becomes easier to estimate the time required and create a realistic schedule. These three concepts are connected because the life cycle tells us about the project progress. WS helps identify the work, and the time management help us organize that work within the available time. So now I'll talk about that how the concepts connect. Another important learning for me was that this concept should not be built separately. For example, imagine that we have to develop a university mobile application. First, we need to understand the project objective and life cycle. Then we can break the project into similar activities using WBS. For example, the activities should be include requirements gathering, interface design, login development, timetable, feature testing, and deployment. So after identifying these tasks, we need to estimate how long each task will take and understand whether some tasks depend on others. Finally, we need to decide how we are going to manage the development process. If requirements are likely to change, agile may be suitable. If requirements are fixed and clearly defined, a traditional approach may work better. So I now see project management as a connected process rather than a collection of separate topics. So now I'll talk about how my thinking was changed. Before this course, I thought project management was mainly about completing tasks on time. I also assumed that having a detailed plan at the beginning would be enough to make project successful. My thinking had changed because now I understand that IT project can be affected by changing requirements, technical problems, time, limited resource, communication issue, and unexpected delays. On assumption was that was challenged was my understanding of waterfall. Previously, I thought that the sequential approach was automatically better because it seemed more organized and easier to control. After learning about Agile, I realized that flexibility can also be more important in IT project. For example, when developing software, user may not know exactly what they want at the beginning. Their feedback may change the requirements. My main shift is thinking is that good project management is not just about following a plan. It is also about responding appropriately when the project environment changes. So now I'll talk about application to a real IT project. For my IT project example, I have chosen a university student portal. The system could allow students to log in, check their timetable, view grades, receive notification, and access important university information. For this project, I would choose Agile. My main reason is that the requirements may change after students and staff start using the system. For example, initially we may think that students only need timetable and grades. However, after receiving feedback, they might request such as assignment, reminder, or better notification. With Agile, we can develop the system in smaller increments and receive feedback regularly. For example, the first stage could focus on requirements and planning, then we could work on the interface and login system. After that, we could develop timetables and grades feature followed notification. Testing and feedback would happen throughout the development process rather than waiting until the very end. For time management, I would break the project into smaller tasks and estimate the time required to each task. If one task takes longer than expected, I would review the schedule and adjust the plan rather than simply ignoring the delay. This example helped me understand how project management concept can actually applied on IT project. So now I'll talk about the agile versus traditional process like the waterfall. If I had to choose between agile and waterfall for my future IT career, I would personally prefer agile more for most software development projects. The main reason is flexibility. Technology projects often involve changing requirements, user feedback, and new ideas. Agile allows a team to respond to this change more easily. Another advantage is that testing and feedback can happen continuously. This means problem can potentially be identified earlier instead of discovering major issue near the end of the project. However, I do not think agile is always the correct choice. If a project has a very stable and clearly defined requirements and changes are unlikely, a traditional waterfall approach may be more suitable. Therefore, my learning is not simplify that agile is better than waterfall. Rather, the project manager needs to understand the characteristics of the project and then select the methodology what that best fits the situation. For my future career, I think understanding both approaches will be more valuable than only knowledge one. So now I'll talk about challenge and future application. On concept I found challenging was project time management. At first, I thought time management simply means creating deadlines. However, I realized that it also involves estimating task duration, understanding dependings, and prioritizing activities and dealing with possible delays. I found this challenge because it is difficult to predict exactly how long an IT task will take, especially when technical problems can occur. I improved my understanding by thinking about project as smaller activities rather than on longer tasks. For example, instead of saying develop a website, I can break into requirements design, development, and testing deployment. I can apply this concept to my university studies, especially in group assignment and IT project. I can use WBS to divide assignments into smaller tasks, time management to organize deadlines, and agile principle when working on project where requirements may change. In my future IT career, I believe this skill will help me communicate with team members, manage deadline, respond to change, and select an appropriate project methodology. So, to conclude, my main learning from weeks 1 to 4 is that project management is much more than simply completing tasks. It involves understanding the project life cycle, selecting an appropriate methodology, breaking work into manageable tasks, meaning managing time effectively and adapting to change. This concept have changed the way I think about IT project, and believe they will be used throughout my studies and future career.